Hello, welcome to the channel Why Stories. Enjoy watching.
Freed for lunch, the woman decided to stop by home and check on her sick husband. But as she quietly entered, she overheard his conversation on the phone, and she was so stunned by the suddenly revealed truth that she collapsed. Welcome to our channel. If you enjoy our story, don't forget to subscribe and like. Thank you for your support, and we wish you a pleasant listening experience. Monday morning began for Elena with her usual hustle and bustle. Sunlight streamed through the thin curtains, filling the small but cozy kitchen of their apartment with light. Outside the window, the waking city hummed, cars honked, and the voices of pedestrians echoed. Elena hurriedly stirred her coffee, glancing at the clock. Today, she had a crucial presentation ahead, one that would determine her promotion. "Alejandro, have you seen my blue folder with the documents?" she called toward the bedroom, adjusting her tailored jacket. Her husband appeared in the doorway, tall and fit, his hair damp from the shower. In a business suit, he looked especially attractive, and Elena, as usual, couldn't help but admire him. "I think you left it in the living room yesterday," he said, approaching her and giving her a casual kiss on the cheek. "Are you nervous about the presentation?" Elena nodded, smiling gratefully. After 3 years of marriage, she still froze at his smile, at the care she thought she saw in his eyes. Although sometimes, Elena noticed that this care appeared only when he needed something from her. "Of course, I'm nervous. Don Enrique hinted that, if successful, he's ready to discuss promoting me to department head," she replied, pouring coffee into her travel mug. "You'll do great," Alejandro encouraged her, sipping his own coffee. "I believe in you. By the way, speaking of work, it looks like I have a major deal in the works with the Americans. If it all goes through, by New Year's we can afford that trip to Patagonia you've been dreaming of." Elena beamed, but deep down, she noted that Alejandro wasn't talking about her promotion. He quickly shifted the conversation to himself. As usual, the phone rang, and Elena looked at the screen, surprised to see that it was her mother-in-law calling. Carmen rarely called in the mornings, preferring evening chats. "Good morning, Señora Carmen," Elena answered, exchanging a glance with Alejandro. The silence on the other end of the line made her uneasy, and then an unfamiliar woman's voice spoke. "Hello, this is Isabel, Carmen's neighbor. Your mother-in-law has been hospitalized. She had a stroke, and her condition is critical. The doctors say she needs constant care." The kitchen seemed to spin before Elena's eyes. She handed the phone to Alejandro, whose face instantly changed, his expression filled with anxiety, fear, and confusion, emotions rapidly switching as he spoke with the neighbor. "I need to go to my mom right away," he said, ending the conversation. "But I have an important meeting with the investors today. I can't cancel." Elena looked at her husband, stunned by how casually he spoke about his mother's life-threatening condition while thinking of the meeting. "Is this how loving sons behave?" "I'll go," she said quietly. "My presentation is today, but I'm sure Patricia can replace me. She's up to speed on all the details of the project." Alejandro sighed with relief, too quickly and easily for someone whose mother was in a critical state. "Are you sure? What about your promotion?" Elena set her mug down and hugged her husband tightly. "Your mom is more important. I'll take leave and go to her. She needs care now, and you can't abandon your project. I understand that." Alejandro hugged her tightly, burying his face in her hair. "What would I do without you?" he whispered. "I'll come as soon as I'm done with the Americans, no later than a week. And then I'll visit every weekend, I promise." The office greeted Elena with the usual buzz of voices and the clatter of keyboards. Patricia, her colleague and friend, raised an eyebrow when she saw Elena's expression. "What happened? You look like you've just heard about the end of the world," she said, stepping closer. Elena quickly explained the situation. Patricia frowned, crossing her arms over her chest. "And you're going to drop everything and leave? But what about the presentation, your promotion?" Patricia shook her head. "You know, sometimes I feel like you put his interests ahead of yours too often. Like that business trip last year, remember? You turned it down so Alejandro could go to his training." Elena crossed her arms defensively. This is different. We're talking about his mother. She's seriously ill. Why can't he take leave? Patricia asked bluntly. Why does it always have to be you sacrificing your interests? Because his project is critical for the company, Elena replied. But her inner voice whispered that her presentation was just as important. They had been working for 2 years to secure this contract. What about me? I'll manage. Patricia looked at her sympathetically. As my mom always says, if a woman keeps sacrificing herself for her husband, one day she'll find there's nothing left to sacrifice. Be careful, Elenita. Don Enrique, a large man with sharp eyes, listened intently to Elena. His office, spacious and bright, now seemed like an impenetrable fortress. Family matters, you say, he mused, tapping his fingers on the table. How long do you plan to be absent? The doctors say about 2 months, Elena replied, trying to sound confident. Patricia will handle today's presentation, she's fully briefed. The director shook his head disapprovingly. I must warn you, there's no such thing as an irreplaceable person in business. After 2 months, your position might be filled. His words hit Elena's heart like a heavy stone. Everything she had worked so hard for could disappear. But the image of her ailing mother-in-law, alone in a hospital bed, kept her from letting doubts grow. I understand the risks, she replied firmly, and I'm willing to accept them. The evening bus station was buzzing with announcements, the noise of buses, and the voices of people seeing others off. Elena stood by the bus with a small suitcase. Across from her stood Alejandro, holding her hands. His face showed concern, but there was something in his eyes that looked like relief. I love you, he said, looking into her eyes. And I'm really grateful for everything you're doing for my family. For our family, Elena smiled, feeling a lump rise in her throat. And I love you. Take care of yourself while I'm gone, and don't just eat empanadas. Alejandro hugged her tightly and kissed her. I promise I'll come as soon as I'm done with the Americans, he whispered. And then every weekend I'll be with you. Keep me updated on your mom's condition. Okay? Elena nodded, but something in her husband's tone made her heart tighten, as if he was making a promise he had no intention of keeping. The bus slowly pulled away from the station, taking Elena into the unknown. The small provincial town where her mother-in-law lived greeted her with a chilly morning rain. The raindrops tapped on the taxi's roof as it drove her to a 2-story house on the outskirts. Carmen lived in a small but cozy apartment on the ground floor. At the entrance, an elderly woman with an umbrella was waiting for her. You must be Elena? She asked, smiling kindly. I'm Isabel, Carmen's neighbor. We spoke on the phone. Elena nodded gratefully, shaking the extended hand. It's a pleasure to meet you, Senora Isabel. Thank you for taking care of my mother-in-law. Isabel carefully looked Elena up and down, her gaze carrying something that resembled sympathy. Carmen's in the city hospital. I'll take you there after you drop off your things, Isabel said with a slight provincial accent. She's not doing well at all. Alejandro hasn't come, he's too busy, I guess. Isabel's last words carried a barely noticeable bitterness that didn't escape Elena. How long have you known Carmen? Elena asked as they rode the bus to the hospital. About 15 years, we've been neighbors, Isabel replied, gazing out the window at the rain-soaked streets. We were good friends when we were younger, planting gardens together, raising kids, but then Carmen became distant. Maybe when Carlos, her husband, passed away, something inside her broke. She started guarding her Alejandro like the apple of her eye, everything for him, all for him. Elena nodded understandingly. She knew that Carmen had changed drastically after her husband's death 10 years ago. Alejandro rarely talked about it, but he once mentioned that his mother had become overly protective after losing her husband. Does Alejandro visit his mom often? Elena asked cautiously. Not really, Isabel smiled, and there was more in that smile than words could convey. Well, he's a busy man, a big shot in the capital. Carmen can't stop talking about how he's making a career in the city, how everyone praises him, even when he doesn't show his face for 6 months. The hospital room smelled of bleach and medications. The quiet beeping of medical equipment and muffled voices of the staff in the hallway could be heard. Carmen lay on the bed by the window, pale and gaunt, with 4 tubes in her arms. Elena instinctively pressed her hand to her mouth, holding back her emotions. Always energetic and independent, her mother-in-law now looked helpless. "Carmen, look who's here to see you," Isabel said softly, approaching the bed. Carmen's eyes slowly opened, and when she recognized Elena, she weakly smiled. The left side of her face barely moved. "You came," she said with difficulty. "And Alejandro?" "He has an important meeting, but he'll come in a few days," Elena replied softly, sitting next to her and gently taking Carmen's hand. "For now, I'll stay with you. Is that okay?" In the hallway, Elena spoke with the doctor, an elderly man with tired eyes. "Her condition is stable, but recovery will take time," he explained, flipping through the chart. Nearby, a nurse pushed a squeaky medicine cart. "She will need constant care and rehabilitation, massage therapy, physical therapy, and speech therapy." "And how long will it take for her to fully recover?" Elena asked, feeling a coldness inside her. The doctor looked at her over his glasses. "With good care, at least 6 months, and even then, I can't guarantee full recovery of her speech and mobility." 6 months, not 2 months like Alejandro said, 6 months away from home, from work, from the life she knew. Elena felt the ground slip from under her feet. The first days in the provincial town flew by with daily trips to the hospital. Carmen was slowly recovering, and after 2 weeks, she was discharged. Now Elena's life consisted of massages, exercises, cooking, washing, cleaning, and trips to the pharmacy. Each day repeated the previous one. Alejandro called every evening, inquiring about his mother's health and telling her about his progress with the American contract. But he couldn't come in the first 2 weeks, citing unforeseen complications in negotiations. "I know it's tough for you," he said, "but you're my strong girl, you'll manage." "You promised to come, Alejandro," Elena quietly reminded him. 2 weeks have passed. "I'll definitely come this weekend, I promise," Alejandro reassured her. "I'll finish with the documents on Friday and head straight to you." Days turned into weeks, and a month passed, but Alejandro still hadn't come, twice canceling his trip at the last moment. The first time due to an urgent meeting, the second time due to a sudden business trip. Isabel helped Elena care for her mother-in-law, bringing homemade tamales and herbal teas. At 60, she was a surprisingly energetic and perceptive woman. They quickly became friends, and Elena often caught her giving her sympathetic looks. "He won't come," Isabel said one evening as they were preparing dinner together. "Alejandro has always been like that, promises mountains of gold, and then forgets. For Carmen, it's breaking her heart, and for you, he doesn't mind ruining your career." Elena wanted to object, to defend her husband, but the words got stuck in her throat. Deep down, she was beginning to understand that Isabel was right. On a Saturday evening, when Carmen had already fallen asleep after taking her medication, Elena was scrolling through social media just to distract herself and feel a connection to her old life. On the page of her former classmate Mariana, there was a photo from a trendy restaurant in their city. Elena was about to scroll past it, but something made her go back. In the background, at a table by the window, Alejandro's profile was clearly visible. Next to him was a young blonde woman Elena didn't know. They were sitting very close, shoulder to shoulder, laughing about something. Alejandro was whispering something in her ear, and the blonde woman was coquettishly smiling, twirling a strand of hair around her finger. Elena's heart skipped a beat, then started to race, her mouth went dry. She zoomed in on the photo, hoping it was a mistake, hoping it was someone who looked like her husband, but it was definitely Alejandro, her husband, who was supposed to be working at an important meeting today, at a restaurant, with a stranger. The clock on the wall ticked loudly, counting the seconds as Elena stared at the screen. Her first impulse was to call her husband and demand an explanation. But something stopped her. Fear, the unwillingness to hear the truth, or a vague premonition that this was only the tip of the iceberg. There was a knock at the door, and Isabel stood at the threshold, holding a thermos. "I thought you might need some company," she said, handing over the thermos. "This is herbal tea. I gathered it myself. It helps when your heart aches." By the look on Elena's face, Isabel immediately understood that something was wrong. She silently sat down next to her, patiently waiting for Elena to speak. "He lied to me," Elena finally said quietly, showing Isabel the photo. "He said he was at a meeting, but he was at a restaurant with some woman." Isabel stared at the photo for a long time, then shifted her gaze to Elena. The wrinkles around her eyes deepened, as though from inner pain. "There might be an explanation," she began cautiously. "A business meeting." But her eyes said otherwise. They spoke of regret, bitterness, and something akin to an old wound. "You know something, don't you?" Elena asked, her voice firm, not a question, but a statement. "Please, tell me the truth." Isabel sighed heavily, as though making a difficult decision. "You see, Elena, I didn't want to interfere, but I know this family too well," she said, glancing towards the bedroom where Carmen was sleeping. "When Carlos died, Carmen gave everything to her Alejandro, her love, her care, and money for his education. And he became spoiled. He got used to having his every wish fulfilled, but he never gave anything in return." Isabel paused, gathering her thoughts. "I saw how he treated his girlfriends. He'd introduce them to his mother, swear that it was love for life, and then a month later, a new one. And he was always forgiven. Carmen still believes that he was just searching for his happiness. But to me, he simply never learned to appreciate anything." In the silence of the room, the clock on the wall ticked clearly, and the rain rustled outside the window. Elena felt her world, which she had built over 3 years, collapse like a house of cards. "I'm going home," Elena said firmly. "For a couple of days. I need to check the apartment and talk to my husband. To see his face when I ask him the truth." Isabel looked at her carefully and nodded silently. "I'll look after Carmen. But be ready, sometimes the truth can be too bitter, like a medicine that doesn't taste good but is healing." In the darkness of the room, Elena lay awake for a long time, staring at the ceiling and listening to the breathing of her sleeping mother-in-law in the next room. Tomorrow, she would buy a ticket for the morning bus, and to face whatever awaited her at home, she had to be ready to accept the truth, no matter how painful. Maybe Alejandro really had a business meeting, Elena thought, turning to the other side. But then why did he say he was going to a meeting? And why is this woman so close, and why are they laughing? The question swirled in her head, not letting her sleep, forming a mosaic, a picture that scared her to the core. The morning bus sped through the bleak autumn landscapes. Elena sat by the window, watching the raindrops slide down the glass, creating whimsical patterns. During the 3-hour journey, she went over dozens of scenarios for her conversation with Alejandro, but none of them seemed right. The city greeted her with gray skies and light rain. The taxi dropped her off at the familiar entrance, and for a moment, everything seemed like it used to be. She would go up to the apartment now, and Alejandro would meet her with a smile, but the memory of the photo in the restaurant quickly brought her back to reality. The usually noisy entrance now felt empty and echoing. Every step on the stairs echoed. Elena stopped at the apartment door, listening. It was silent. She took out her keys but decided at the last moment to call. The phone conversation with Alejandro the night before had been brief and tense. "I'll come tomorrow morning," she said. "I need to pick up some things for your mother." "Okay," he replied after a pause. "I'll probably be out. I have an important meeting tomorrow." "On Saturday?" Elena asked, surprised. "Yes, urgent project," Alejandro replied quickly. "You have the keys, take whatever you need." Elena decided not to mention her suspicions over the phone. She wanted to see his face when she asked about the blonde from the restaurant. The next morning, before getting on the bus, she received a message from Alejandro. "I'm feeling sick, I'll be home. Please buy some cold medicine." Elena's chest tightened, the lie was becoming more obvious. Yesterday, an important Saturday meeting, today a sudden illness. She bought the medicine at the pharmacy near the bus station, deciding to play the part of the caring wife until the end. The doorbell rang sharply in the silence of the apartment, footsteps were heard, and the door opened. Alejandro stood in the doorway, wearing home pants and a t-shirt, his hair disheveled, his face pale. "Elena," he said, surprised. "You're so early. I thought you'd be here after lunch." He awkwardly hugged her, and Elena smelled expensive perfume, not his, but a woman's. "I decided to come on the first bus," she replied, walking into the apartment and looking around carefully. "How are you feeling?" "I bought the medicine." The apartment was tidy, but something had changed. On the couch were unfamiliar decorative pillows with a bright geometric pattern, and fresh flowers stood in a vase on the coffee table. Elena never bought such pillows or put flowers in that vase. "Thanks, I feel better," Alejandro said, taking the bag of medicine. "How's Mom? Have the doctors said anything about recovery?" Elena took off her coat and walked into the kitchen. On the drying rack by the sink were 2 coffee cups, one with a pink lipstick stain on the rim. "At least 6 months," she answered, trying to keep her voice steady. "By the way, did you have guests?" Alejandro froze for a moment, then shrugged casually. "A colleague stopped by yesterday evening, brought some documents for the project." "A female colleague?" Elena asked, pointing at the cup with lipstick. "Yes, Marina from the marketing department," he replied too quickly. "We're working on a presentation for the Americans." "Coffee?" Elena nodded and sat at the table. A strange calm enveloped her, as if she were watching everything from the outside. "Tell me, how is Mom's rehabilitation progressing?" Alejandro asked, turning on the coffee machine. "Are the doctors optimistic?" "Carmen talks about you every day," Elena replied instead of answering. "She asks when you'll come." "I don't know what to tell her anymore." Alejandro lowered his gaze, looking guilty. "You know how important this contract is," he began. "If it all works out, I'll be able to take leave and come for a week or 2. I just need to finish with the documents." He set a cup of coffee in front of Elena and sat across from her. His phone, which had been lying on the table, suddenly vibrated. Alejandro quickly turned its screen down, but Elena had already seen the name Christina and a heart next to it. "I need to call your mom," Elena said, standing up. "I promised to let her know I arrived safely. Can I use the house phone? My phone died on the way." "Of course," Alejandro nodded. "It's in the bedroom. I'll go take a shower." The bedroom greeted Elena with dimness, the curtains were drawn. She turned on the light and froze in surprise. On the bedside table, where she usually slept, was a bottle of women's perfume, and next to it, a hairpin with shiny rhinestones. Elena had never had such things. The sound of running water came from the bathroom. Elena slowly approached the wardrobe and opened the door. Among her clothes hung blouses and dresses that weren't hers. In the lingerie drawer were lace sets that definitely didn't belong to her. A lump rose in her throat. So that's why Alejandro didn't want to come to his mom's. That's why he was so glad I left. All this time, another woman has been living in their apartment. The house phone sat on the table by the bed. Elena absent-mindedly picked up the receiver and began dialing Isabel's number, but hearing voices in the corridor, she froze. Alejandro was speaking to someone. A muffled but furious whisper came from the hallway. Elena carefully put down the receiver, approached the door, and listened. "I told you not to come today," Alejandro hissed. "My wife's here." "I forgot something yesterday," a female voice replied. "How was I supposed to know she'd show up without warning?" "She wrote she would come." "You said you'd come after lunch," the woman exclaimed. "I thought I'd have time to grab my things and leave." Elena pressed herself against the wall, feeling her heart pound against her ribs. So it's true, all this time, while she was taking care of his mother, Alejandro was living with another woman in their apartment, in their bed. "Quiet, she'll hear," Alejandro hissed. "Leave now, I'll call you later." And what then? The woman asked, "Will you lie again about being busy with the Americans?" "Christina, not now," Alejandro snapped. "Go, while she's in the bedroom." "I'm pregnant," Christina suddenly said. 2 months and I'm tired of hiding." Silence fell in the hallway, then Alejandro cursed quietly. "Are you sure?" "Absolutely," Christina replied. "We need to figure out what to do next, and decide together." "There's only one way," Alejandro said after a pause. "We need to get rid of the two burdens. We'll put my mother in a specialized nursing home, I've already checked. And I'll divorce my wife as soon as my mother's a bit better. She doesn't need these shocks right now." Elena felt the ground slip from under her feet, a ringing filled her ears, and nausea rose in her throat. She barely held back from screaming. All this time she had sacrificed her career, her future, for a family that, as it turned out, no longer existed. "How long will this all last?" Christina asked. "I can't wait forever." "At most a couple of months," Alejandro replied. "Once Mom can manage without constant care, I'll tell Elena about the divorce. The nursing home is already chosen, just need to finalize the documents." Elena covered her mouth with her hand, holding back sobs. How could he do this? How could he plan to get rid of his mother, as if she were an unwanted thing? How could he betray them both? On shaky legs, she returned to the phone and dialed Isabel's number. After a few rings, the familiar voice answered. "Hello?" "Isabel, it's Elena," she said quietly, trying to keep her voice steady. "It's all true, everything is worse than you said." She quickly told Isabel about the overheard conversation. Isabel sighed heavily. "I knew he didn't appreciate either you or his mother, but this," her voice cracked, "what are you going to do now?" "I don't know," Elena answered honestly, "but first I'll talk to him. He needs to know that I heard everything." Hanging up, Elena took a deep breath, trying to calm herself. Tears streamed down her face, but inside, determination was growing. No more being a victim, no more sacrificing myself for a person who never appreciated it. She walked out of the bedroom and headed to the living room. Alejandro was sitting in the chair, nervously scrolling through something on his phone. Seeing her tear-streaked face, he jumped up. "What's wrong? Is Mom worse?" "No," Elena replied quietly. "Mom is still the same, but it will be worse when she finds out that her beloved son is planning to send her to a nursing home." Alejandro's face went pale. "What nonsense are you talking about?" He tried to smile, but his eyes betrayed his panic. "I heard everything," Elena said, amazed at her own calmness. "Your conversation with Christina about the baby, the nursing home, the divorce." Alejandro froze, desperately searching for words. "Elena, you misunderstood," he began. "I would never." "Enough," she interrupted him. "Enough with the lies. I'm leaving and taking my things. You can stop pretending now." She headed for the bedroom to gather what she needed, but Alejandro grabbed her by the arm. "Wait, let's talk." His voice sounded pleading. "It's not what it seems." "How is it not?" Elena bitterly smiled. "Explain to me how this could not be what it seems. You were cheating on me while I was taking care of your mother. You were planning to get rid of both of us. What is there to explain? You don't think about me at all," Alejandro suddenly exploded. "You left, abandoned me, all concerned about my mother. And who will take care of me? Who will think about my needs?" Elena stared at him, not believing her ears. This man, whom she had loved for 3 years, whom she had given everything, her love, career, future, was now showing her his true face. "If you were a real wife," Alejandro continued, "I wouldn't have to look for another woman, but you're never around when I need you. You're always busy with your career, and now with my mother." The sound of the front door opening interrupted his tirade. A young blonde woman entered, the same one from the restaurant photo. Seeing Elena, she froze in the doorway. "Sorry, I thought you'd be alone," she said, glancing from Alejandro to Elena. "No, Christina, you did just right," Elena replied instead of her husband. "You came just in time." At that moment, Alejandro's phone rang. He glanced irritably at the screen, but seeing the caller's name, he turned pale. "It's from the hospital," he whispered, "from the department where Mom was." Elena froze. The conversation was brief. Alejandro listened without saying a word, growing paler with every passing second. Mom had a second stroke, he said after finishing the call. The doctors say her condition is critical. He looked at Elena with accusation. This is your fault, you left her to rush here and make a scene. Don't you dare, Elena said quietly but firmly, don't you dare blame me for what you've done. She turned and left the apartment, for the first time in 3 years, feeling that she was finally seeing the truth. The bus raced through the dusk, carrying Elena back to the provincial town. The scenery outside changed, but she didn't see it. In front of her eyes was the scene in the apartment, Alejandro's angry face, Christina's confused look, and the news of her mother-in-law's second stroke, which pierced her heart with sharp pain. The bus swayed over the uneven road, lulling the other passengers to sleep, but Elena couldn't close her eyes. Her mind was filled with bitter, painful thoughts, burning with their truth. 3 years of life, she thought, 3 years I believed in us, in family, in love. And all this time. How could I not see? Her phone vibrated, a message from Isabel. Carmen is in intensive care. The doctors won't let us in, I'm waiting for you at the hospital. Elena closed her eyes. Poor Carmen, she didn't deserve such a son, such betrayal. The thought that Alejandro wanted to send his mother to a nursing home still made her feel sick. How could he do this to a person who gave him her whole life? When the bus arrived at the station, it was well past midnight. The town was asleep, the streets were empty. The cold wind cut through her, but Elena barely felt it. The coldness inside her was much stronger. The taxi took her to the hospital in a matter of minutes. In the reception area, the dim light glowed, the smell of medicine and disinfectant hung in the air. Isabel was sitting on a plastic chair by the duty doctor's office, hunched over, hugging herself. Elenita, she said softly, lifting tired eyes, you came after all. Elena sat down beside her, feeling all her strength leave her. How is she? She asked quietly. Isabel shook her head. The doctors aren't saying much, just that her condition is serious but stable. They won't let anyone in, but they promised we could go in briefly in the morning. And Alejandro? Elena asked, though she already knew the answer. He called, said he's on his way, Isabel replied with a bitter smile, but that was 6 hours ago. So by my calculations, he should have been here by now. They sat in silence, broken only by the muffled voices of the nurses and the beeping of medical equipment from the nearby rooms. Elena couldn't hold back anymore, tears streamed down her face, shaking her whole body. Isabel silently embraced her shoulders, letting her cry. He betrayed both of us, Elena sobbed. All this time, he had another woman, and she's pregnant. And him? He planned to put his mother in a nursing home, said she was a burden. Isabel was silent, holding Elena tightly. In her silence, there was more understanding and sympathy than in any words of comfort. In the morning, the noise in the corridor woke them up. Elena strained her stiff neck. She and Isabel had sat in the uncomfortable chairs all night. Alejandro walked into the reception area, wearing a pressed suit, perfect hair, no sign of fatigue or worry on his face. Only his eyes betrayed the tension. How's Mom? He asked, not looking at Elena. Her condition is still critical, Isabel replied. They promised we can go in at 8 for 5 minutes. Alejandro nodded and sat down on the empty chair opposite, ostentatiously burying his face in his phone. The silence between the three of them was palpable, thick as fog. At 15 to 8, the doctor from the first day arrived in the corridor. He looked tired, but his voice was firm. Are the relatives of Carmen Gutierrez here? Alejandro jumped up first. I'm her son. How is she? The doctor gave him a careful look, then turned to Elena. And you? I was her son's wife, Elena replied, stumbling over the word was. The patient's condition has stabilized, the doctor said, but the second stroke was more severe than the first. There is damage to the speech center, and it's still hard to say how full the recovery will be. When will she be discharged? Alejandro asked, impatience in his voice. The doctor furrowed his brow. It's too early to talk about discharge. Right now, it's important to make sure her condition stabilizes completely. Then there will be a long rehabilitation process. She will stay in the hospital for at least a month, and after that, she will need specialized care. Can we arrange for a nursing home? Alejandro asked quickly. I have a good place in mind. Alejandro, Elena exclaimed, not believing her ears. How can you talk about this now? The doctor looked from one to the other, clearly uncomfortable. I think it would be best if you visit the patient first, and then deal with the organizational matters, he said. You can visit her one at a time for no more than 5 minutes. Alejandro rushed forward, but the doctor stopped him with a gesture. The patient specifically asked for her daughter-in-law to come first, he said, looking at Elena. She's conscious and can communicate to some extent. Elena nodded and followed the doctor into the intensive care unit. The smell of medicines, the beeping of monitors, the dim light, all of it hit her, making her momentarily hold her breath. Carmen lay on the high hospital bed, tangled in tubes and wires. Her face had grown gaunt, her skin taking on a sallow hue, but her eyes, the same clear, intelligent eyes, looked at Elena with incredible strength. Carmen, Elena said quietly, gently taking her mother-in-law's hand, how are you feeling? The woman weakly squeezed her fingers and tried to say something. The words came with great difficulty, but Elena could make them out. Did you see him? Elena nodded, understanding that her mother-in-law was asking about her son. Yes, he's here, waiting in the hallway. Carmen shook her head, and tears welled up in her eyes. No, you know everything. Each word was a struggle for her. Elena froze. Did Carmen know about her son's infidelities, about his plans? Yes, Elena answered softly, I know everything. I know about Christina, the baby, and the nursing home. Carmen closed her eyes, tears rolling down her hollow cheeks. When she looked at Elena again, there was so much pain in her gaze that the young woman felt her heart contract. Sorry, Carmen whispered, my fault, I allowed everything. Elena shook her head, unable to hold back her own tears. No, you're not at fault. It's his choice, his decision. I knew, Carmen said with difficulty, I always knew what kind of person he was. After his father died, I spoiled him, forgave everything, raised an egotist. The monitor next to the bed beeped more frequently. Carmen gripped Elena's hand tightly. Leave him, she said clearly, don't ruin your life, you're a good person, you deserve better. Elena couldn't believe her ears. The mother was blessing her to leave her son. It was so unexpected, so unlike the mother-in-law who had always put Alejandro's interests above everything else. And you? Elena asked, what will happen to you? I'll manage, Carmen smiled weakly, it's not the first time. A doctor peeked into the room. Time is running out, he said softly, the patient needs rest. Carmen made a weak gesture, asking him to wait. Then she looked back at Elena. Let me in, I want to say something to him. Elena nodded, kissed her mother-in-law on the forehead, and left the room. In the hallway, Alejandro was pacing impatiently. Finally, he snapped, what did she say to you? Go to her, Elena replied quietly, she's waiting. Alejandro quickly walked toward the room. Elena sat down on a chair next to Isabel, feeling a strange sense of relief, as if the heavy burden she had carried for these years was starting to melt away. What did she say? Isabel asked, watching Elena closely. She knew everything about him, Elena replied softly. She said she raised him to be selfish and that I should leave him. Isabel raised her eyebrows in surprise but didn't say anything. They sat in silence, listening to the sounds from the room. Suddenly, Alejandro's loud voice came from within. You can't do this to me, this is my apartment. A moment later, the door to the room flew open, and a furious Alejandro stormed out. His face was red, his eyes flashing with fury. You, he pointed at Elena, you turned her against me. What did you say to her? The doctor ran out of the room behind him. Stop it immediately, he said sternly, you're in a hospital, there are seriously ill patients here. Alejandro ignored him and kept shouting. She deprived me of my inheritance. She said she's transferring the apartment to you. You put her up to this, you set all this up. Elena stared at him in astonishment. Could this yelling, out-of-control man really be her husband, the one she had loved for 3 years? I knew nothing about the apartment, she said quietly, and I didn't ask for anything. Liar, Alejandro hissed, you've always been sneaky. You wormed your way into my mother's trust, and now you want to leave me with nothing. Young man, Isabel intervened, standing up from her chair. Calm down, you're going to hurt your mother more with your yelling than any stroke. And who are you? Alejandro lashed out at her, sitting here with your advice, stay out of other people's business. I'm the one who's known your mother for 30 years, Isabel replied calmly, and if she decided to transfer the apartment, she had her reasons. 2 security guards approached, drawn by the noise. Any problems here? One of them asked, sizing up Alejandro. The doctor shook his head. The gentleman has overreacted to his mother's condition. He needs to calm down, preferably outside the hospital. Alejandro glared at everyone, then turned sharply and stomped off toward the exit. This isn't over, he threw over his shoulder, I won't let this slide. When the sound of his footsteps faded in the hallway, Elena finally exhaled. Only now did she realize that she had been sitting there, tense, bracing for a blow. Can I see Carmen again? She asked the doctor. Just for a minute, he hesitated but nodded, only for a very brief time. She needs rest after such a stress. Carmen lay with her eyes closed, but when Elena entered, she looked at her and gave a weak smile. Don't be afraid of him, she said with difficulty. The apartment, it'll be yours, you deserve it. Carmen, I don't want the apartment. I know, her mother-in-law interrupted, you're good, and I'm a bad mother, I raised a monster. Elena gently stroked her hand. You're not a bad mother, you loved him, that's not a crime. Love, not like this, Carmen whispered, I'll fix my mistake. Leaving the room, Elena felt an unprecedented lightness, as though the heavy burden she had carried for all these years had melted away without a trace. The truth was painful, but it brought freedom. What now? Isabel asked when they left the hospital. The morning sun blinded Elena. She squinted, looking at the awakening town, at people hurrying on their business, at the blue spring sky. I don't know, Elena replied honestly, but for the first time in a long while, I feel like I can start over. Her phone vibrated in her pocket, an unfamiliar number, but with a local area code. Elena hesitated for a moment but answered anyway. Hello, Elena, a confident male voice said on the other end, this is Miguel, your neighbor. We met when you were leaving the apartment. Remember, I helped you with your suitcase? Elena vaguely remembered the tall man she bumped into in the hallway when she left Alejandro's apartment. Yes, of course, she replied. What's this about? I work at Mediapolis Group. I saw your resume in the database. We have an opening for a PR manager, and I wanted to discuss a possible collaboration. Elena froze, not believing her ears. Could life really be giving her a chance to start over? Who is this? Isabel whispered, intrigued by Elena's expression. It seems like my future, Elena replied softly, feeling a smile spread across her face without her conscious effort. The big city greeted Elena with noise, bustle, and indifference. After the quiet provincial town, everything seemed too loud, too fast, too foreign. She stood at the bus station with her suitcase, looking around in confusion. Where do I go? Where will I live? Returning to Alejandro's apartment was out of the question, even with the decision of the mother-in-law to transfer it to Elena. Her phone vibrated, a message from Isabel. Carmen is stable, sends her regards, and says not to worry about her. Elena smiled. Over the past 2 weeks, spent at the hospital with her recovering mother-in-law, she had become close to both women. Isabel turned out to be a reliable friend, and Carmen wasn't the woman Alejandro had painted her to be. Without his influence, the woman seemed to bloom, becoming softer and warmer. The decision to return to the city was difficult, but necessary. The interview at Mediapolis Group couldn't be missed. A chance to restart her career didn't come often. Elena dialed Patricia's number, the only friend she could trust. Patricia, it's me. Can I stay with you tonight? An hour later, she was sitting in the kitchen of her friend's cozy apartment, holding a cup of hot tea. Outside, the spring rain drizzled, making rhythmic patterns on the windowsill. So, it's all over? Patricia asked, watching Elena carefully. Yes, she nodded, the divorce is just a matter of time. The papers are already in process. And the apartment? Isabel said, your mother-in-law transferred it to you. She did, Elena smiled faintly, but I don't know if I want to live there, too many memories. You can rent it out and live on that money, Patricia practically noted, and for now, stay with me. The couch in the living room is yours. Elena gratefully shook her friend's hand. Tomorrow I have an interview at Mediapolis Group, I hope it works out. Serious company, a competitor of ours, by the way. How did you get in? Elena told her about the strange call from Miguel. A neighbor, you say? Patricia narrowed her eyes slyly, and what does this mysterious neighbor look like? I don't remember much, Elena answered honestly, tall, I think, dark hair. I wasn't really paying attention at the time. The morning was clear and sunny, as though nature itself was smiling at Elena, promising good changes. Dressed in a smart suit and with her hair carefully styled, she headed to the given address. The Mediapolis Group building was located in a modern business center, with glass, chrome, and marble. A smiling security guard in the lobby checked her documents and gave her a pass. The 14th floor, office 1402, he said, they're expecting you. The company's office surprised Elena. Instead of the usual gray cubicles and dreary offices, the space was open, bright, with vibrant accents. Young people worked at computers, quietly chatting with one another. The air smelled of freshly brewed coffee. Elena? A receptionist called, Miguel is waiting for you in the meeting room. Can I offer you coffee or tea? Coffee, please, Elena smiled, feeling the tension begin to release. Miguel was exactly as she vaguely remembered him, tall, broad-shouldered, with kind brown eyes and a small graying stubble. He looked to be about 35, but the crow's feet at the corners of his eyes betrayed someone who smiled often. Good to see you, Elena, he said, shaking her hand, have a seat. How was your trip from? He paused, as though not wanting to show that he knew about her situation. From the province? Elena helped him out. Thanks, it was good. The interview went surprisingly smoothly. Miguel asked precise but not hurtful questions. He listened attentively, occasionally nodding. Elena felt her nerves slipping away with each passing minute, replaced by professional confidence. Your resume is impressive, Miguel said after they discussed Elena's previous experience, especially the project for Tecnologias Advance. We're looking for someone with experience in the tech sector. I must admit, Elena began cautiously, I haven't practiced for a while. In the last few months, I've been taking care of my sick mother-in-law. Miguel nodded in understanding. This speaks to your humanity. Business is not just about numbers and contracts, but also about relationships. People who know how to care for others usually become the best leaders. An hour later, Elena left the office with the contract in her bag. She was hired as the senior PR manager, with a salary higher than her previous job. She was to start in a week, which gave her time to sort out things with the apartment and documents. Let me treat you to lunch to celebrate our cooperation, Miguel suggested, escorting her to the elevator. There's a great restaurant in the next building. During lunch, the conversation unexpectedly shifted from work topics to personal ones. I know you've recently been through a difficult time, Miguel began cautiously. I don't want to sound tactless, but if you need help finding a place to live or anything else, the company can assist. Elena looked at him carefully. How do you know about my problems? Miguel blushed, looking away. Alejandro and I went to the same university. Not that we were close, but we have many mutual acquaintances. When your resume came across my desk, I recognized the name right away. And you offered me the job out of pity? Elena asked sharply. No, Miguel answered firmly, out of professionalism. Your resume speaks for itself. And personal circumstances have nothing to do with work. He paused, then added quietly, although I admit, it was nice to offer the job to Alejandro's wife. He's always been so self-assured. They both laughed, and the tension lifted. Lunch stretched out, and the conversation flowed easily and casually. Elena was surprised to find that, for the first time in a long time, she felt comfortable in a man's company. As they were leaving the restaurant, a little girl about 6, with dark braids and bright blue eyes, ran up to them. "Dad," she exclaimed, running to Miguel, "you promised we'd go to the park." An elderly woman followed behind her. "Sorry, Don Miguel, Sophia insisted on finding you." "It's okay, Rosa," Miguel smiled, lifting his daughter in his arms. "I did promise." "Elena, let me introduce you to my daughter Sophia and our nanny, Rosa." The girl looked at Elena with curiosity. "You're beautiful," she suddenly said. "You have eyes like the princess in my book." Elena laughed, feeling warmth spread through her heart. "Thank you, Sophia, you have beautiful eyes too." "Dad always says, they're just like Mom's," the girl said seriously. "Are you coming to the park with us?" Miguel blushed. "Sophia, Elena is probably busy." "Actually, I'm not busy," Elena smiled. "I'd love to go with you if the offer still stands." The park was full of life. Young parents with strollers, couples in love, elderly people sitting on benches. Sophia dashed from one play area to another while Miguel and Elena walked behind, chatting leisurely. "My wife passed away 2 years ago," Miguel said quietly when the conversation turned to Sophia. "Cancer, the disease was fast, it almost left no time for goodbyes." "I'm so sorry," Elena replied sincerely. Sophia was 4 at the time. She remembers her mom, but the memories are fading. Sometimes it's scary to think that one day she won't remember her face. They sat on a bench, watching Sophia swing on the swings under Rosa's watchful eye. "You know, the hardest thing about single parenting?" Miguel asked. "It's not the exhaustion, not the lack of time, but the inability to share joy. When Sophia first read a word or drew something special, I had no one to show it to, no one to share those moments with." Elena remained silent, touched by the openness of this strong yet vulnerable man. "Sorry," Miguel said suddenly, "I don't know why I'm telling you all this. I'm not usually this talkative with people I don't know well." "It's okay," Elena smiled softly. "Sometimes it's easier to talk to someone you hardly know." Sophia ran up to them, flushed and happy. "Dad, can I have ice cream, please?" "Just one," Miguel said sternly, "and no chocolate, it hurts your throat." "Can Elena choose?" The girl asked slyly. Grown-up girls know what's the best ice cream. Elena laughed. "I think vanilla with dulce de leche would be a great choice." "See, Dad," Sophia triumphantly exclaimed, "Elena is smart." When the sun began to set, they reluctantly left the park. Outside the metro station, Miguel suddenly asked, "Would you like to have dinner with us?" "Nothing special, just homemade food." "I'd love to," Elena agreed, surprising herself with her decision. Miguel's apartment turned out to be spacious and light, not luxurious but cozy, with children's drawings on the walls and bookshelves instead of trendy trinkets. "I usually cook myself," Miguel said, putting on an apron, "nothing fancy, but Sophia doesn't complain." "I can help," Elena offered. "I cook pretty well." Meanwhile, Sophia pulled a notebook out of her backpack. "I have homework," she said importantly, "in math." "Dad says, math is fun, but I don't think so." "Let's see," Elena suggested, sitting next to her. "Maybe together we'll find something interesting in these problems." When Miguel called them to the table, the homework was successfully completed, and Sophia, with shining eyes, was telling Elena about her collection of seashells. During dinner, when Sophia had already gone to bed, Miguel and Elena stayed alone in the kitchen. The sounds of the city drifting through the open window, somewhere in the distance, music played. "Thank you for today," Elena said quietly. "I haven't felt this free in a long time." Miguel looked at her intently. "Elena, I know you've been through a lot, and maybe now isn't the time for new acquaintances, but I'd really like to see you again, not just as colleagues." Elena felt her heart skip a beat. It wasn't fear, not uncertainty, but something else, hope, anticipation for something new and bright. Me too, she simply replied. The next few days flew by with errands, finding an apartment to rent, handling paperwork, and preparing for her new job. Elena visited Carmen and Isabel, who were slowly becoming a real family to her. Carmen was getting better, and the doctors spoke of her possible discharge in a month. Elena tried not to think about Alejandro, but the town was too small to avoid a meeting completely. She had just left the office after her first workday when she saw him at the entrance to the business center. "We need to talk," he started without a greeting. "We have nothing to talk about," Elena replied calmly. "All matters will be settled by our lawyers." "You ruined my life," Alejandro hissed, grabbing her arm. "You turned my mother against me, took the apartment, and now you've gone to work for my enemy. This was all planned, wasn't it?" "Let go of me," Elena said firmly, pulling her arm away, "and never touch me again." "I won't let you walk away so easily," Alejandro continued. "You won't get away with this, I'll make sure of it." "Everything okay?" came a calm voice from beside them. Alejandro turned around and flinched when he saw his former classmate. "So that's what this is about," he hissed. "You decided to steal my wife, Miguel. You think you'll get away with this?" "Elena is no longer your wife," Miguel replied calmly, "and I suggest you leave before I call security." Alejandro shot them both a hateful look, then turned quickly and stormed off. "Are you okay?" Miguel asked softly when Alejandro had disappeared from sight. Elena nodded, feeling the tremor leave her body. A strange calm filled her soul. She was no longer afraid of Alejandro, no longer afraid of his threats. For the first time in a long time, she felt safe and free. "You know," she said to Miguel, "I think I'm starting a new life, and I like it." He smiled without saying a word, and in that smile, Elena saw the promise that the best was yet to come. The autumn morning was gray and rainy. Elena stood by the window of her new apartment, which she had rented after the divorce, and watched the people hurrying through the puddles. Today was the day of the court hearing, the last session of the divorce proceedings with Alejandro. The documents, gathered by the lawyer, were neatly stacked on the coffee table. In the 3 months since that fateful day when she caught her husband with his mistress, so much had changed. A new job at Mediapolis Group, new friends, a new apartment, and Miguel and Sofia, who had become an integral part of her life. The phone rang, the lawyer's name appeared on the screen. "Good morning, Elena," the man's voice came through the phone. "Just a reminder, the session is at 11. Alejandro has filed a counterclaim for moral damages. He claims you took advantage of his mother's illness to seize the property." Elena sighed. Alejandro wasn't going to give up easily. "This is absurd," she replied calmly. "Carmen made her own decision about the apartment. We have her written testimony." "Yes, but he's trying to prove that she was incapacitated due to her illness. In any case, be prepared for an unpleasant scene." The doorbell rang. Elena said goodbye to the lawyer and went to open it. On the doorstep stood Miguel with a bouquet of wildflowers. "I thought you might need some moral support," he smiled. "Can I give you a ride to the court?" Elena gratefully accepted the flowers. Over the past months, their relationship had developed slowly but surely. Miguel hadn't rushed things, understanding that Elena needed time to heal. They often spent weekends together. He, Elena, and Sofia, who had grown very attached to Elena with all her heart. "Thank you," she said softly. "You have no idea how much this means to me." In the corridor of the courthouse, it was crowded and noisy. Elena's lawyer, Licenciado Eduardo, was already waiting for them near the courtroom. "Good afternoon," he greeted them, shaking Miguel's hand. "Alejandro is already here with his lawyer, and I should warn you, he's very determined." "We are too," Elena replied firmly. The courtroom, with its high ceilings and wooden panels, was intimidating. Elena sat next to her lawyer, trying not to look at Alejandro, sitting across the aisle, but she could feel his hateful gaze on her. The judge, a middle-aged woman with keen eyes, began the session. Elena listened to the lawyer's speeches and answered questions, but everything felt unreal, as if she were watching a film about someone else's life. On the counterclaim, said Alejandro's lawyer, our client claims that Elena intentionally turned his mother against him, taking advantage of her fragile state. Carmen, under the influence of her daughter-in-law, changed her will and gave away the apartment that rightfully should have gone to her son. I object, Licenciado Eduardo intervened. We have Carmen's own testimony, notarized, and also a medical certificate confirming her full mental competence at the time of the decision. Elena listened to this exchange, feeling anger rising inside her. How can they speak like that about his own mother? How can they call it manipulation when Carmen simply saw her son's true face? Elena, the judge addressed her, could you explain to the court why Carmen decided to give the apartment to you instead of her son? Elena took a deep breath, gathering her thoughts. Carmen made this decision after learning that Alejandro had been cheating on me all the time while I took care of her after her stroke, and that he had planned, and I quote, to get rid of two burdens, me and his mother, by sending her to a nursing home without her consent. A silence hung in the courtroom. Alejandro paled and muttered something furiously to his lawyer. This is slander, the lawyer jumped up. The plaintiff has no proof of these claims. On the contrary, Licenciado Eduardo calmly replied, we have the witness testimony of Isabel Morales, Carmen's neighbor, who overheard many phone conversations between mother and son. Moreover, the door to the courtroom suddenly opened, and everyone turned. In the doorway appeared a wheelchair being pushed by Isabel. In the chair sat Carmen, thinner but with a determined expression on her face. I apologize for being late, Your Honor, said Isabel. The flight from our city was delayed due to bad weather. Mom, Alejandro gasped, jumping up. What are you doing here? Doing what I should have done a long time ago, Carmen replied firmly, her speech still slightly slurred from the stroke, but each word was clear. I'm correcting my mistakes. The judge, a bit flustered, allowed Carmen to testify. Isabel wheeled the chair to the witness stand. Carmen, do you understand that you are under oath and must tell the truth? The judge asked. I understand, Carmen nodded, and that's why I'm here. The truth is, my son Alejandro, whom I loved more than life, grew into an egotist because of me. After my husband's death, I spoiled him, indulged his every whim, turned a blind eye to his actions. She turned her gaze to her son, who lowered his head. When I got sick, Elena gave up her career to take care of me, and Alejandro didn't even come to visit me. Instead, he brought another woman into the house while his wife was caring for his mother. Carmen turned to the judge. I transferred the apartment to Elena not because she manipulated me, but because I wanted to restore justice. This girl lost 3 years of her life with my son, and another 6 months taking care of me. She deserves this apartment, and my son, she paused for a moment, holding back tears, my son deserves a lesson. Perhaps, finally realizing that everything in life has its price, he will become a better person, at least I hope so. A silence fell over the room. Alejandro sat with his head bowed. His lawyer nervously shuffled through papers, unsure of what to argue. Carmen, the judge finally asked, do you confirm that you were fully conscious and acted on your own free will when you decided to give the apartment to Elena? I fully confirm, Carmen replied firmly. Moreover, I want to state that I fully support Elena's decision to divorce, and I consider my son's claims for compensation to be unfounded. After Carmen's testimony, the outcome of the case was clear. The court ruled to dissolve the marriage and dismissed Alejandro's counterclaim for compensation. The apartment remained legally with Elena. As they left the courtroom, Alejandro caught up with them in the hallway. Are you satisfied? He threw at Miguel, you took my wife, took my property. Alejandro, enough, Elena said tiredly, it's over. I didn't take anything from you. Everything that happened is the result of your own actions. And you, Mom, Alejandro turned to Carmen, how could you? Your own mother, and you betrayed your only son. I didn't betray you, Carmen replied quietly, you betrayed yourself with your selfishness. I love you, Mejito, that's why I did this. One day, you'll understand that it wasn't out of revenge, but out of love. Alejandro looked at them all with hatred and resentment, but something in his mother's words seemed to penetrate deeper than his rage. He turned and stormed out. Do you think he'll ever change? Elena asked thoughtfully, watching him leave. I don't know, Carmen sighed, but for the first time in his life, my son is facing the consequences of his actions. Maybe this will be the beginning of a change. That evening, they sat in a cozy little restaurant near the courthouse. Elena, Miguel, Sofia, Carmen, and Isabel were celebrating not so much the victory in court as the beginning of a new chapter in their lives. Isabel and I have decided to live together, Carmen announced, causing surprised looks. You know, it's more fun for two lonely old ladies. Her house is bigger than my apartment, and there's a garden. We'll grow flowers and grumble at the young people. Everyone laughed. Sofia, who had grown accustomed to calling Carmen Abuela Carmen, sat next to her and enthusiastically told Elena about her school successes. How's your new job going? Isabel asked Elena, do you like it? I love it, Elena answered sincerely. The team is amazing, the projects are interesting. And most importantly, I feel like a professional again, not just someone's wife. Miguel, sitting next to her, quietly took her hand under the table. I have a proposal, he said. How about we go out of town this weekend? The weather's supposed to be good. We can take a walk in the forest, have some asado. Hooray! Sofia exclaimed, can I bring my new ball? Of course, Princessa, Elena smiled, and don't forget your warm jacket. It can be chilly in the forest in autumn. Watching this scene, Carmen exchanged a knowing look with Isabel. These two, Elena and Miguel, were clearly made for each other. A calm, reliable man and a strong but sensitive woman, with Sofia, who needed a mother's love so much. After dinner, when Carmen and Isabel had left for the hotel and Sofia had fallen asleep in the back seat of the car, Miguel drove Elena home. Want to come in? She asked at the entrance. We could have some tea. In her small rented apartment, it was warm and cozy. Elena put the kettle on, and Miguel stood by the window, looking at the night city. What are you thinking about? She asked, walking up to him. How strange life is, he answered. Just 6 months ago, we didn't know each other. And now I can't imagine how I lived without you all this time. Elena smiled, feeling her heart fill with warmth. For the first time in a long time, she was truly happy. You know, she said quietly, when I found out about Alejandro's betrayal, I thought my life was over, but it turns out, it's just beginning. Miguel gently took her hands. Elena, I understand it might be too soon, but, he paused, gathering his thoughts, Sofia asks me every day when you'll come back to us. And I find myself waiting for that just as much as she does. He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. This isn't an engagement ring, he said quickly, seeing her confusion, just a gift, a symbol of starting a new relationship, if you're ready, of course. Elena opened the box. Inside was a delicate silver ring with a small diamond. It wasn't luxurious, but incredibly beautiful in its simplicity. I'm ready, she answered softly, putting on the ring. I'm ready to start over, with you. A year later, Elena, Miguel, Sofia, and their newborn son Mateo visited Carmen and Isabel. The women had, as planned, made a flower bed in the garden, and now proudly showed off their achievements. Look, Mateo, what flowers, Sofia said, holding her brother in her arms under her father's watchful eye. When you grow up, I'll teach you to recognize all the plants. Elena looked at this idyllic picture and couldn't believe her happiness. Who would have thought that betrayal, which caused so much pain, would ultimately lead her to real love and family? Carmen came up and took her arm. Are you happy? She simply asked. Very, Elena answered sincerely. And you? Me too, the elderly woman smiled. You know, I got a letter from Alejandro. He's in Buenos Aires, working for a small company. He says he started seeing a psychologist, trying to figure himself out. I'm glad to hear that, Elena said, and it was true. She hadn't held a grudge against her ex-husband for a long time. I hope he finds his happiness. And we've already found ours, Carmen smiled, looking at Miguel, gently holding little Mateo in his arms. Elena looked at her new family, so different, imperfect, but so real. The ring with a small diamond gleamed on her finger, not luxurious, but symbolizing a true feeling and a promise that could be kept.
If you're enjoying it as well, leave a like and subscribe to the channel.